Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, partners, and contributors around the world. Welcome to the launch of the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, GEM UAE 2021-2022 National Report. I am Maryam Al-Gimzi from the United Arab Emirates University, and it is my great pleasure to host this event here at Expo 2020 Dubai, and to welcome you all on this special occasion. Under the vision of our wise leaders in the last 50 years, the UAE moved from an oil-based industry to a diversified economy by investing in education, infrastructure to support and develop one of the best nations to live, work, and start a business. The event today is taking place at the heart of Dubai, one of the greatest shows the world has ever seen, Expo 2020 Dubai, where we can see clearly the diversity of different nations coming together. Today, the UAE is a sandbox and an incubator for startups and SMEs from all over the world. UAE is a great business ecosystem. Therefore, I hope this will be a great opportunity for all of you here to establish partnerships with entrepreneurs and SMEs in the UAE. I would like to thank the main contributors to successful GEM reports and events, Ministry of Economy, Khalifa Fund for Enterprise Development, and GEM Consortium. During this hour, we will be launching GEM UAE National Report, where we will learn about the main outcomes of the report and the presentation prepared by GEM UAE writing team. And we'll go over some key entrepreneurial topics. This is an opportunity today in sharing your questions and feedback with business leaders and domain experts. Without further ado, I now welcome His Excellency Faisal Hammadi, Acting Assistant, Undersecretary for Entrepreneurship and SME Sector at the UAE Ministry of Economy, to give his remarks.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, those online, I think it's a very good afternoon now to everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of this setup to celebrate the achievement that has been achieved by the United Arab Emirates to be ranked first in the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor Index. This achievement would have never been possible without the support and without the collaboration of everyone who is part of this ecosystem, be it a government entity, be it an entrepreneur, a university, funds, and all the other players in the ecosystem who made this happen. Let me shed some light about some of the other achievements that have been done in the UAE. UAE has always been a regional and now becoming more of a global business hub and trade hub in this world. We have achieved first in the Arab world when it comes to ease of doing business. We have also achieved first when it came to the Global Innovation Index in the Arab world and the MENA region. And this is actually a translation of what our leadership is looking for and what our leadership is aspiring for when it comes to the position and the offering of those who are in the UAE. Other indicators talking about the VC funding that has been deployed in the UAE. This year, for the first time, we were able to pass the $1 billion VC investment mark. This constitutes doubling the amount of VC investment that has been deployed in the UAE in 2021 compared to 2020. Not to talk about also the number of deals that have been already deployed or that have been achieved here in the UAE. Almost 26% of all the VC deals in the MENA region were happening here in the UAE. And also when we talk about the deal size, it has reached around $7 million, which is a remarkable increase compared to last year. Those indicators all talk about the maturity of the entrepreneurship ecosystem here in the UAE. The efforts that have been put in place recently when it came to entrepreneurship and SMEs in the UAE are remarkable. First thing was establishing the appointment of His Excellency Dr. Ahmed Bilhol Falasi as the Minister of State for Entrepreneurship and SMEs, which shows a full dedication towards this sector. Also, multiple departments have been already established in the Ministry of Economy to make this happen. namely the Department of Entrepreneurship, and also a department concerned with growing SMEs to ensure that they are growing to the next level, whether moving from micro to small or small to medium or from medium to large, to allow all entrepreneurs to really take their businesses to the next level and hopefully to become a global player. We have also launched our entrepreneurship agenda last year. It had 6 main pillars. And to achieve those pillars, we have launched a program called the Entrepreneurial Nation. And this is an invitation to everyone to visit the website for the program. It has 3 main pillars. I have heard a lot of the speakers earlier talking about instilling a mindset of entrepreneurship in students and everyone in the society. The first pillar of our program is actually around that, building the capabilities around the entrepreneurship mindset and the skills and capabilities required to take people to test and to experiment and to really become an entrepreneurs. This pillar is called the scale up pillar. And here the target is everyone in the society. It's not only the school students or students at universities, but also we are targeting moms at home, we are targeting those who are retired and so on. And our aim is that everyone will consider entrepreneurship as an opportunity and as a way forward. We want our students to graduate with not thinking of what career they can take on, but also what business they can establish. A second pillar is around the startup, going through the stage of entrepreneurs. So in this pillar is mainly supporting the businesses to really start up and establish and move forward. And then the last pillar is on the scale up. In scale up, we have multiple tracks. The focus here is on the ones that are trying or aiming to achieve a J progression in their journey. Tracks that target digitization of SMEs, tracks that target providing financial and financing, make it easier to SMEs and entrepreneurs, other tracks on expanding export and so on. Government efforts, the UAE government efforts has been remarkable, not only during COVID, lots of stimulus have been pushed into the market to ease down the impact of COVID. Some of those were direct, some of those were indirect, but the main one was ensuring that the country is always open, whether it is for people to come in or for goods and services to be traded across. Also, other efforts by the government related to the 50 years projects. I will mention a few of those. One was around talent. A lot of entrepreneurs, when they come to the UAE, they see it a place where they can access talent easily. So there were lots of policies that have been pushed forward to ensure that golden visas and other type of visas are available for talent and entrepreneurs to look at the UAE as a destination, not only as a transit place. Others were around allocating 5 billion dirhams to SMEs and to ensure that they can grow and they can access funds. We prioritize certain sectors, but it's available to all sectors. And when we talk about prioritizing certain sectors, it's education, healthcare, space, food and water security, among others. Others also, as part of the 50 years project, was the 10 by 10 export program, where we are targeting 10 countries with a 10% increase on a yearly basis. And a lot of that will be done through facilitating all those trade with the different partners through foreign trade agreements that we are pushing forward heavily as a government. Others also include the in-country value and also the public procurement program to ensure that those who are working in the UAE, local companies established here, they have access to all the means to grow. I won't take much of your time. I'm really glad to be part of this setup. And again, congratulations to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Giving her remarks on behalf of Khalifa Fund for Enterprise Development, I welcome Fatima Mehyas, Strategic Affairs Senior Manager.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and entrepreneurs. My name is Fatima Mehyas. I'm working as the Strategic Affairs Senior Manager at Khalifa Fund for Enterprise Development, and it's my pleasure to speak to you all today. The topic of my keynote speech is centered around UAE's perspective on entrepreneurship. As someone who's both an Emirati entrepreneur and worked within the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I've gathered a deep understanding of what it means to be an entrepreneur in the UAE. It's undeniable that Emiratis and the UAE as a whole have genuine respect for those who aspire to enter entrepreneurship and what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is not just any job, it's an entire lifestyle that depends on having a certain mindset towards business, towards work, and towards life in general. I would like to quote Dr. Stephen Hill, who said that entrepreneurs are brave. I think it's the brave mindset that describes them the best. It's a full-time job, actually. By building a framework that empowers entrepreneurs, we see creation of products, services, jobs, and wealth. But not just individual wealth, a collective wealth that contributes toward our non-oil economy and GDP. As Tom Silvac said, small businesses are the lifeblood of our economy. This is something that the UAE has recognized, and thus have invested resources, opportunities, and knowledge to ensure that our entrepreneurial ecosystem is growing to be amongst the strongest in the world. Whether it's leadership support, or government entities and private sector businesses collaborating in public-private partnerships, or venture capitalists lending their knowledge and lending their investment, or each one of you here supporting SMEs on a daily basis by giving that coffee shop, the furniture shop, the car service, or the starting consultant a chance on a daily basis. Moreover, a lot more has been showcased through strategic elements that have been laid out by our leadership, such as the National Agenda for Entrepreneurship and SMEs, which aims to establish the UAE as primarily entrepreneurial nation by 2031 and under the leadership of the Ministry of Economy. Then, of course, there are the enterprise development organizations, such as Khalifa Fund ourselves, or Dubai SME, or Hub 71, or MAN, or many more, that we all work tirelessly to provide new initiatives, programs, training, guidance to ensure SMEs are supported and given the best chance to succeed. From leadership to individuals, UAE has showcased what it means to have a strong entrepreneurial ecosystem and a systematic framework that allows entrepreneurs, startups, and SMEs alike to thrive. As a result, in the UAE, approximately 94% of companies are either micro or SME, and that makes 60% of our non-oil GDP. As a collective, we are already advancing our position in the entrepreneurial curve, and again, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate all of you here on the UAE being #1 in the GEM Entrepreneurship Index. In addition to that, in GEM NSI Index, we ranked #1 as the most supportive environment for entrepreneurship. As we move onwards to our next 50 years, it's imperative that we continue to build upon our current perspective, support, and appreciation for entrepreneurs. We are truly looking forward, being proactive, and envisioning the next 50 years. I have no doubt that we will see the UAE as the leading hub for entrepreneurs and enterprise development. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Fatima. Representing the United Arab Emirates University, I welcome Professor Ahmed Marad, Associate Provost for Research, Deputy Commissioner General of the UAEU Pavilion, to give his remarks.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the beginning, I would like to extend warm greetings of the leaders of the UAE University. So, as you know, that the entrepreneurship is the engine that translates the activity, the creativity into innovations, and innovations into business opportunities, and opportunities into positive effects and impact in society, such as job creation and economic structuring. The UAE government has declared that entrepreneurship is one of the top priorities in its 50 economic plan. The government set ambitious aims for entrepreneurship in the UAE, such as making the UAE one of the top 3 entrepreneurial nations worldwide within the next 10 years. The GEM is the most important source of information for entrepreneurship policy, unlike national statistics, with varying definitions of what entrepreneurship means. The GEM provides rich data that are harmonized across all participating countries. Thus, the data allow reliable cross-national comparison of a multitude of entrepreneurship-related phenomena. The results of the new UAE GEM study show great promise for the realization of the government's ambitious goal. The public perception of entrepreneurship in the UAE is very positive. Successful entrepreneur enjoys a high status and a high level of respect. The population also have positive perception of opportunities to start a business in the UAE. This shows in a very high level of interest in entrepreneurship. Almost half of the population reported an intention to commence startup activities in the next 3 years. At the same time, the GEM reports points out that an entrepreneurial mindset is not enough to realize startup activity. There is a long path from intending to start a business to actually creating a new venture. It is particularly noteworthy that the UAE scored highest in the world in the National Entrepreneurship Context Index, which measures the average state of the national entrepreneurial framework conditions. This suggests that the UAE environment is conducive to develop entrepreneurial activities. The GEM is an important source of information for the scholars, policy makers, and practitioners worldwide. The UAE University is proud to contribute to this initiative and be the leading institution in the UAE for research-based information for developing entrepreneurship policy and practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. I would like to welcome Dr. Llewellyn from IESE and Dr. Elif from Sorbonne University, Abu Dhabi, to present the UAE entrepreneurial landscape.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you. Okay. Do you want that one? No. Okay. Okay, so hello and welcome to the UAE entrepreneurial landscape. I'm Dr. Llewellyn Thomas. Firstly, before Elif and I start, I just want to mention both Professor Nihal and Dr. Shafiq, who were integral to actually preparing the report over the past couple of months, actually, to get it ready for today. Okay, so as you're going to see going forward, this has been recurring. A lot of the results we're going to be seeing echo what we've seen in the global report. And as we've heard, the conditions for entrepreneurship in the UAE are favourable. The UAE is the blue line here, and you can see across all of the 12 pillars, the UAE is outperforming both the GEM average, the GCC average, and the high income average, which says, as you can see, that things are looking good here in the UAE. In terms of new activity and TEA rates, you can see there was a slight fall in 2020, not as much as one would have expected, given the impact of the pandemic, but things have picked up back into 2020, and we're pretty much where we were in 2019, showing us that entrepreneurship is alive and well here in the UAE. In terms of individual perceptions of entrepreneurship, these have always been strong here in the UAE. And even with the pandemic, these have basically continued their upwards flow, their upwards growth. What is of interest here is the light blue line at the bottom, which shows that there was quite a high point in 2017, and then the interest in entrepreneurship having a social objective dropped dramatically, but that has been increasing year on year ever since, showing that there's now an increasing recognition of the social role that business can bring inside the UAE. And what is also of interest on this graph is the dark blue line, which showed a dramatic drop from 2020 to 2021. And now this is, everyone prefer a similar standard of living. Now, for those of you who know, the similar standard of living is actually a more competitive society. So interestingly, there's been a drop in this, which is suggesting that people are more, inside the UAE, people are more interested for more competition, which is an interesting finding. Moving forward, individuals can see opportunities. There's basically 73% of individuals across the UAE believe there's opportunities out there, and they also believe it's easy to start a business, which echoes a lot what we heard for the high-income countries on the global report. What is of also concern, which we've been hearing, is fear of failure would prevent starting a business, and that's at 47. So basically 1 in 2 people are afraid of starting a business. So this is something that obviously needs to be addressed, but at the same time, we wouldn't want to drop that to zero. We don't want to have foolhardy entrepreneurship that was never going to work anyway, right? So, however, with the pandemic, and as we heard in the global report, it has become harder to start a business. As you can see to the right-hand side here, basically both nascent and owners basically all believe it's become some significantly harder to start a business over the past couple of years. Okay, so I will now move over to Dr. Elif.
Thanks, Llewellyn. Okay, so who are those entrepreneurs that we've been talking about since this morning in the UAE? Well, on average, they are young, they are male, they are well educated, and they are fairly wealthy. And the main reason why they want to become entrepreneurs is actually for becoming even more wealthier. But it has to be taken into account by the fact also that now they are also becoming entrepreneurs because of to earn a living due to the scarcity of jobs. Okay, so this is the second main reason. But 68% of the entrepreneurs in the UAE are motivated by higher income, as in the rest of the world, as we discussed this morning in the global report. Okay, it is also worth highlighting that to make a difference in the world has shown the highest increase in the last year. Okay, so with the pandemic, we might actually think that the Emirati entrepreneurs are becoming more interested in doing good while they're also doing business. Oops. No?
Big green one.
The green one? Yes. Okay. So, sorry. So these entrepreneurs are visionary, they are creative, but what they lack is a bit of get up and go attitude. Okay, and this lack of proactivity has been quite consistent over the time. Now, if you look at the distribution of males and females entrepreneurs in the UAE, we can see that the early stage activities have been increasing for both males and females in the UAE up until 2019. Okay, not surprisingly, in 2020, we see a slight decrease in the entrepreneurial activities. But what is more concerning, that there is a huge drop in the female entrepreneurship for 2021, as is highlighted by Stephen this morning. So this is a very concerning issue, and I'm sure that it's going to be discussed at great length in this afternoon's Women Entrepreneurship session. When we look at the geographical scope of activities, we see that actually there are very few international activities in the UAE. Businesses remain fairly local, but they do have growth plans, especially in terms of size. They seem fairly optimistic in creating more jobs in the future, and even more in this last year. Now I'll go back to Llewellyn.
Okay. So some other good news is investment, both formal and informal, is returning to pre-pandemic levels. There was a slight drop, as you can see, well, quite a dramatic drop in 2020 for percentage of informal investors, but now back in 2021, basically informal investment has effectively returned to where it was in 2019. And overall, the UAE government response to the pandemic is perceived as effective, with 92% believing that the government has supported them well over this period, VUCA period that we've been experiencing. So, and as we know, as we've heard about the NESI report, all in all, the UAE remains one of the best places in the world at the moment to be an entrepreneur. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, professors, for this thorough presentation. Now your time has come. In the next 25 minutes, we will be having the Q&A session. We would love for you to share your questions to the speakers that shed light on many areas of the UAE's entrepreneurial and startup landscape. Before we dive into the Q&A session, I would like to remind you to kindly state your name and workplace and direct the question to one of the speakers. Please raise your hand and the team on the floor will be providing microphones. Any questions? Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Winchi Sampaio, Program Director for the Cartier Women Initiative. My question is on the UAE research side around why there's not more women participating in entrepreneurship, and rather your research has revealed any specific barriers that they're facing. And of course, would love to hear locally also from the UAE partners around, perhaps from the Caliphate Fund representative on rather they are doing anything around women entrepreneurship support in the region.
Thanks for the question. It's working. Yep. Okay, well, we don't have much insights at the moment because, as you could have seen, up until 2019 in the UAE, the female entrepreneurship was increasing. So we were in a good trend. Now, with the pandemic, of course, it dropped, and it dropped even more in 2021 for the female entrepreneurs compared to the male ones. But overall, I think female entrepreneurship is on the increase in the UAE. Now, the effects of the pandemic, of the COVID-19, it's something that we'll have to really analyze in the upcoming times. We don't have maybe enough insights at the moment just to talk about it. But mainly, and we discussed very briefly this morning, I think it has been discussed and we'll discuss more this afternoon, is the fact that with the pandemic, with staying at home, unfortunately, there are more that is done by the woman than the men inside the household. And I think that takes up time, energy, and the opportunities that might be used for entrepreneurship otherwise. If you want to add on.
I have not much more to add beyond that. However, I would call on Professor Nihal. I mean, she is probably our main policy lead here for the team. If she has any thoughts on this.
Thank you, Llewellyn. I think actually this question is going to be addressed in the panel this afternoon, where we will be talking about women entrepreneurship. But definitely there is something that has been observed not only in the UAE but also in the whole MENA and Africa, is that there is a gap between intentions and starting a business. And also, so this is true for men and women, but it's even more true for women. Now, actually, the reason why we have this gap between intentions and starting a business could be explained by different factors. In some countries, this could be related to cultural factors, but this is not the case in the UAE. But then actually you can look at explanation like, for example, opportunities, networking opportunities, peer-to-peer programs, coaching programs, having role models. This is very important because, you know, starting a business, it's not only about having the skills, it's also about, being resilient and having the resilience, having the courage, you know, and it's very important to be inspired, you know, by other women entrepreneurs. So someone like Khawla, for example, who was talking this morning, is extremely inspirational for other women entrepreneurs. So anyway, we are going to discuss it further in the afternoon, but this is just some of the explanations.
Thank you, doctors.
Hello, I'm Karen Feinberg Consulting.
If you would allow me just to add maybe a remark on the question. Yeah, sorry. So when it comes to women in general here in the UAE, we take the gender balance very seriously here in the UAE, and we have a council that addresses gender balance, and part of it is probably women in entrepreneurship. We have seen a lot of Emirati females and also residents who are in the UAE who have already been part of the, I would say, the top businesswomen in the region. I think more than 30% of those who made the mark were from here, from the UAE. So there are a lot of push and a lot of support to women when it comes to entrepreneurship. We just have seen Khawla, and also there were some companies graduating from the UAE get acquired, like InstaShop, which was already established by a female. It was run by a female. Also, I have seen lots of females already getting into entrepreneurship. And also on the other side, to prepare them to become entrepreneurs. When we take a look at the education system here in the UAE, we have a lot of the females who graduate from high school, almost 90%, they go to pursue their higher education. So they have been provided already a way to pursue their education. And in the education system, we started to embed more entrepreneurship as part of it. There is already a program that when it comes to teaching entrepreneurship and creativity, it is mandatory on every single student in the UAE. There was another program that had been pushed forward where we established hubs, entrepreneurship hubs in the universities, whether in United Arab Emirates University, at HCT, at other universities, and we have seen very, I would say, impressive examples and businesses coming out of there. And through our program, which is the Entrepreneur Nation, we are taking this forward to the next level, where those who graduate from universities and schools will be incubated, will be given the opportunity and the support to be taken forward. Not to mention the effort that is being exerted by our colleagues in Khalifa Fund, in Dubai SME, in Ruwad, in Ras Al Khaimah SME, in Llewellyn, Fujairah, and others. There is a huge emphasis on female. I have seen lots of workshops that have been addressed exclusively to female, in Ajman and others, for example, to really educate them, train them, and give them the full support to take their businesses to the next level. I have also seen lots of effort in our Ministry of Community Development when it comes to productive families, where they are given the full support to become more independent and to push their ideas forward and to establish their businesses. So to your point, women entrepreneurship is at our agenda. Lots of policies, lots of laws, lots of things are being pushed forward to make it happen. Inclusivity is for sure at the top of our agenda.
Hi again, Fatima from Khalifa Fund. I just like to echo what our colleagues from the ministry said. I think it's the opportunities are open to both male and female. If not, as he mentioned, for example, we have specific training sponsored by Facebook for women entrepreneurship and so on. Being at Khalifa Fund and offering all kinds of services, I noticed even before the pandemic that in the training that we offer, it's always packed with more females, although it's open to both. However, when they go to the next stage, which is actually asking for funding and getting the funding, they're getting less, and more males get to go seriously and start the business. I think it's about the nature of the females, especially here, from what I saw, is that we're very cautious. Risk-taking is less from what I saw from the trainings that we have. So when they realize, oh my God, the business has to do 1, 2, 3 and set up and legal and things, they're like, no, this is a lot, maybe we can't do it. So it's about making them believe. I think it's in education, it's from their childhood, it's the gap that we need to focus on. However, in regards to opportunities, there are a lot of opportunities. So yeah, this is based on my perspective, and my observation is the reason that in the UAE there is more male rather than female, especially in the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we can go to the next question. Sorry to steal a question.
Yes,
Go ahead.
moving on to the next question.
Hello, Karen Feinberg, Feinberg Consulting, Harvard University affiliated with the Graduate School of Education. And I wanted to, you answered part of my question, but in terms of, for instance, women entrepreneurs, and anyone starts at such a young age, and family education, and the soft skills needed for, let's say, women to be assertive and learn about finances. And I wonder if you can talk, maybe not here because it's too extensive, but the actual curriculum that might be used to teach that, but also entrepreneurial thinking. Not everybody's going to be an entrepreneur, it's really hard, but you can have an innovation mindset which takes you everywhere. So that's the first question. The second question is, I think I heard the UAE is not as international in its entrepreneurship, and I wonder what will it take to become more international in the entrepreneurship.
Colleagues, if you allow me to take this question. So when it comes to the first question around the skills, curriculum, education, and so on. So in 2017, there was a file that has been emphasized by the government, which is the advanced skills or the soft skills. That was during my time in education as well. The focus was more on how to embed soft skills on the different segments of the society, including students in schools and in universities. And the curriculum, the Emirati school curriculum, which is being taught at schools, has been revamped over the last few years to include a lot of those traits and soft skills to be embedded within the different subjects that are being taught, whether it's in mathematics or in science or in history or in Arabic language or in Islamic studies. So the type of questions and the type of projects that have been pushed forward, they stimulate the students to really embed and develop certain skills like creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, resilience, and so on, all of those traits that are necessary for an entrepreneur to succeed. They will face challenges in the future, but without those traits, they will not be able to take this forward. And also not to mention in the universities as well, there are lots of those programs that have been pushed forward. A lot of, let's say, group work, a lot of real-life scenarios have been already embedded in the programs. So from that angle, there are massive efforts to take that forward at the school level and also at the university level. And then I forgot your next question. I think it was about being more international. So maybe part of what I have already talked about is the 50 years project. And a lot of the initiatives in the 50-year project is to allow more Emirati companies to be available on the international landscape. We aspire that all the companies follow the footstep of companies like Emirates Airlines, Mars, and other, where they started almost from nowhere to become global. And part of our targets when it came to the Entrepreneurial Nation program is to graduate 20 unicorns over the next 10 years. And for those 20 unicorns to be graduating from the UAE, for sure, they have to become more international. Some of the programs are related to increasing the export. Some of it is increasing or focusing on the in-country value. If we talk, for example, about the in-country value, those big companies that are operating and taking tenders in the UAE, the mega ones, they have to somehow, I would say, train and influence the local supply chain to become more global, to become more, let's say, robust. An example is Strata, for example. Today we are manufacturing products and spare parts for aircraft being used in Airbus and Boeing. And a lot of that will come. Also, the strategy that has been pushed forward by the Ministry of Advanced Technology and Industry, where they launched the program called 300 billion, the Operation 300 billion, is to double the size of the GDP from manufacturing sector over the next 10 years. This will provide a lot of areas and a lot of opportunities and at the policy level and also practical level for those companies to become international. It is on our agenda, and hopefully we will come back in a few years' time to talk about those examples that become international.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our last question.
Yes, I'm Nadir Shamlu with the Atlantic Council and formerly with the World Bank. I want to congratulate you on this very fantastic report and certainly this extremely valuable data collection that you have done. I have actually a three-part question or three questions to the different members of the panel. First of all, I wanted to find out whether it's possible to have the gender and sex disaggregated data perhaps on your site or perhaps some in your database that perhaps one could use to analyze some to further analysis. So I wanted to find out whether that sex and gender disaggregated data is available to the public. The second question that I wanted to ask is whether, for instance, it's possible to do analysis. I give an example. For instance, here you have a question here about whether people know others who are entrepreneurs. And for instance, let's say for UAE, you have a rank of 22 out of 47. And then there is another question that is, there is a good environment or supportive environment for entrepreneurship. And here it is 7 out of 47. I wanted to see whether there is a correlation between these two, I mean, across the different categories that you have, whether there is some kind of correlation that one can, or association that one can find. And my last question is perhaps also directed to Madam Al-Hamad. One can, of course, train people on entrepreneurship until the day's end. In the end, any entrepreneur needs early stage financing, and that is not always very much available for women. In fact, when you look at venture capital financing for women, only, even in the United States, only 2 to 5% of venture capital financing goes to women entrepreneurs. So we can train, and we can train them from very early age on. But if there is a bias at that level, at the early stage level, and no matter how much we want to promote entrepreneurship among women particularly, it's going to be, we're going to be heading, or at least banging our heads against the wall. I noticed that you mentioned that you got funding from Plug and Play. Is there something, are there perhaps initiatives in the UAE or elsewhere that clearly promote early stage financing, angel financing, VC financing for women? Because I think that that's the sort of like the bottleneck or the critical or the Achilles heel to women's entrepreneurship, and there is a vast amount of research and findings that show that there is really very strong bias against women who present or who pitch their ideas. So there are three questions I wanted to ask the panel, and thank you very much for this wonderful work. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
So I'll pick up on the first two questions, and then I'll hand over to the. So in terms of the first question, which was related to the gender split, though we have those numbers across basically most entrepreneurial metrics that are covered. In the presentation, we just gave a highlight, was probably the most dramatic highlight. But yes, we have the gender split. We also have it by emirate. We also have it by residency status, and so on. So there's a lot of detail in the report itself that breaks down, a lot of how it splits across the personality, these different aspects of entrepreneurship. So you'll be able to read that in the report. In terms of access to the data, and particularly looking for correlations like that, speak to us. Okay, come and speak to us. We would be more than happy to look at some of those correlations. In fact, sitting back to your left, there is the person who does the data. So he can help you out with that.
So maybe I'll echo what my colleague already talked about when it comes to data. Data is available, and here at the government we always strive to provide an accurate data around all the different sectors, whether it's in economy, entrepreneurship, education, exports, gender balance, sex, and so on. Yes, there are some challenges, or there are challenges, and from those challenges we see opportunities, and we work on that to make things more accurate and more available to the public. I have seen lots of data around, the gender balance, around women in entrepreneurship and others, but we always question, are those the right data? And what can we do to improve those further and further? And also part of the KPIs that we monitor is around how many, what is the split when it comes to entrepreneurs between male and female to be able to improve that further. So yes, there are data. Again, as I said, we are cleansing those data and we are improving our databases as we go, whether it's on the national registry and the entrepreneurship, on funding and others, and we will be sharing more of that transparently with everyone to ensure that it is available. Your next question around the access to funding. There are multiple initiatives that have been already launched by Emirates Development Bank. So part of it was the 5 billion dirhams that are being dedicated to entrepreneurship and SMEs. When it comes to allocating that fund, for sure there is no bias towards male or female. And also we are looking into how to ensure that female are prepared to pitch the right way to get access to funding. Once I was in Hub 71, maybe Khawla was talking about her experience in Hub 71 and plug and play and so on. It was amazing to see that the audience, and all of them are co-founders, so they are not people who are there to get trained or so. No, those are people who have companies, who have already got funded, at least pre-seed or let's say initial stage. And it was around 40% female, whether Emiratis or non-Emiratis. So to your point, yes, there are challenges. I wouldn't say it is solved, but we already see a lot of indications that this challenge is being addressed over and over. Even at the local level when it comes to Emirati females and so on. Fatima was talking about it, probably my colleague Mariam here from Ras Al Khaimah SME and also from people from Ajman and so on. I said there were dedicated workshops and dedicated streams to help female to overcome those challenges. So this will be always on our agenda to ensure that they get access to funding and they are being taught how to get those funds. Part of the programs that we are thinking of is how to provide mentorship for entrepreneurs to pitch their ideas the right ways to investors. Investors are looking into very specific metrics and they want things to be done in a separate way and they are looking for the return at the end of the day. So how can you convince an investor to get access to funds? We will provide more of those trainings to entrepreneurs, including females, and we emphasize wherever the gap is. So yes, it's on our agenda. Hopefully we'll see more of that coming.
Thank you, Your Excellency and Dr. Llewellyn. In the end of this session, I thank everyone who took time of their busy schedules to make this event successful, and we hope to see you in our future launches. It's time for the lunch break, and enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.